Today what we're going to do is we are going to work on some wheels. Full disclaimer, I am a super novice at wheel building. I've only built a couple, maybe 3 or 4 wheels now. So I've learned a little bit in the process, and I continue to share my journey of wheel building here on my YouTube channel. So hopefully this is interesting for some of you out there, and we'll hopefully learn something together. So if you're an experienced wheel builder and you want to follow along and leave us some tips, tricks, suggestions in the comments, please do. And without further ado, let's get into the wheels. I'm gonna have to delete that. We're gonna take the hub off of here. This is the DT Swiss 350 hub. And what I want to do is take this hub off and put it on this rim. Okay, this is the Head Ardennes rim. I have now also purchased some brand new Head Belgian Plus rims. These ones are 20, I have a 28 spoke and a 24 spoke rim that I'm gonna use. And I'm going to take this hub here and these spokes, and I'm going to put it on this rim. And then I'm going to take this hub and some new spokes that are in this box, and we're going to build up this wheel with this hub for Miss Cools using black spokes, because I want to match her front wheel, which has black spokes. So she'll have a completely matching set. And then I'm going to use silver spokes, and there's more. I've got another DT Swiss hub in here. Yes, this is very exciting. Ready for the reveal? I've got a DT Swiss hub, and yes, it is a radially laced designed hub with 24 spokes. And the idea here is that this hub will match this hub on these rims, these Head Belgian Plus. Now, the other stuff we have here is we have just the basic tools. I'm going to use a little bit of tri-flow on the nipples so that I can get a nice, good tension on the spokes. And I've got something else in here that I think some of you will be interested to know about. So let me open up this package and let's take a look at this. All right, so here we have spokes, and this is what I wanted to bring out here. Now, a few of you asked me on the previous video if I would get a spoke tension tool, or a spoke measurement tool. I ordered one of these guys. I got a lot of comments on one of my wheel build videos saying that I really absolutely need one of these, and so I decided to get one. And what's interesting to me is the more I think about these tools and what they do and what they tell you, is that what it can help you help you find out is how straight was the rim before you built up the wheel. So a wheel that is out of round or laterally out of true, there's different reasons for why that could happen. A rim is manufactured and it's turned into a hoop, and then it's seam welded. And so if that seam weld is not perfectly aligned, or if there's a little bit of a twist in the wheel, when you go to true it up, you're going to have unbalanced tension in the spokes in order to make that wheel perfectly round and perfectly true. And so you can actually see that in the spoke tension. My thinking is that if the wheel is under perfect tension on all the spokes, the wheel may not be true. And that can tell you that something isn't manufactured perfectly. It could be the spokes, it could be the rim. More than likely it's the rim, but there's a possibility that it could be something else. In the box, there's a conversion chart. There's this guide right here. This guide is so you can measure your spokes and determine what the thickness of the spoke is. And then over here you have the conversion table, and on the left hand side is deflection, and deflection is this measurement up here along the top of this tool. That's how you take that number off of here, you go over to this side chart here, and you go across based on the diameter of the spoke, and you can get your spoke tension. And it also says when you measure your tension to keep the tool horizontal to the wheel. It also did say to make sure you measure, if it's a butted spoke, make sure you're within the range of the butted portion of the spoke and not off onto the thicker side, and you'll screw up your measurement. What's fascinating though is if you read through the instructions, when you get over to here, it tells you to get the relative spoke tension, which is to take the reading of every spoke on the drive side or the non-drive side, and then take those numbers, write them down, add them up, and then divide by the number of spokes. That gives you the relative spoke tension, or the average tension. Then what you do is you take that number and you multiply it by 0.8 and by 1.2. And what that'll give you is a range of 80% and 120%. Then when you go back and look at your chart of all your spoke tensions, if anything falls outside of either on the low end of 80% of your average or 120% of your average, that spoke is considered to be out of range. So before we tear this wheel apart, I wanted to run through and see if my wheel actually complies with the recommendations over here on these instructions. And so what I did is I followed the instructions and I went ahead and did all the measurements of the spokes. And here's the two charts. This side here is the non-drive side spokes. This is the drive side spokes. And these are the measurements that the deflection measurements that I was able to measure. So you write them all down, you add them up. That's this number here and this number here. This is the non-drive and the drive side. Then you take that number and divide by the number of spokes on the non-drive side, and you get 19 for an average. And then on the drive side, you get 24.96. And that's obviously just due to rounding or due to division. So you might as well just call it what it is, which is 25. And if you look at these numbers, they're all very much close to 25. This side is very consistent, and this side seemed to be a little bit more variable. So anyway, then you take this chart and you take this number right here, this number 19. You go over to your chart and you go down to 19, and then you scroll across to your spoke diameter here. So we were using steel round, 1.8 millimeter. So at 19, we get this number 85. Okay, so that's where this number comes from. So we've got 85. And then we take 85 and we multiply it by 0.8. We get 68, and then 1.2, we multiply it by 1.2, we get 102. And now we take those numbers, 68 and 102, we go back to our chart for our 1.8 diameter spoke. We go 85 across and we get 19, and then we go to, or 68, sorry, we got to find 68, so that's about between 64 and 70, so that's roughly 17, so we could say 16 and a half, right? It's approximate, 16 and a half. So on our low end, our spokes can be 16.5 deflection. This is our tension, X, and then on the upper end, we can go all the way up to 20.5 because we can go 102 kilogram force, or, you know, it's kind of a funny unit. Might as well, it's not to convert it to newtons, you got to multiply by 9.81, but for some reason they didn't do that in this chart. So the 1.2 times 85 is 102, so we go back to our chart, we look for 102, and of course it's not there, but it's between 94 and 105. So we want to be around 20.5 for our deflection. Now we take this range, we go back and look at our numbers, and we see, are we within the range on our non-drive side? And it looks like we're pretty good, except for this one's a little bit high, this one's a little bit high, but everything else is pretty good. So we do the same thing for the drive side, get our range, which turned out to be 23 to 27, go back up here, we got one at 23 and none at 27, so we're pretty good. Even though we didn't know how to do this before when we built this wheel, it just worked out that it's within the specs according to this Park Tool guide system. what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the first spoke. This is called the key spoke. And I have in front of us here the Sheldon Brown Wheel Building Guide online, which is a great resource to help you lace your wheel. Other resources are out there. There's a lot of them, really good ones. There's some good YouTube channels that talk about wheel building. And there's some other really good books out there about wheel building. And I have read a good chunk of the Jobst Brandt wheel building book, which is really good. He goes first into the engineering and stress analysis topics, but then he gets into wheel building as well. But I find that that's all good information. I just think that the Sheldon Brown guide is the most direct for people who are just trying to get their wheels built and not trying to understand all the physics of it. But that is interesting, and it will probably help you in the long run if you understand some of that. We have these head rims, and these have a specific drilling pattern. Not all rims do, but these ones do have a drilling pattern, and that is that the angle of the holes is not perfectly straight through the rim. It's actually on a diagonal, and it's on a diagonal to help you get a good nipple bed into the rim, so it has uniform pressure on that nipple seat where it's going to seat into the rim. If it was straight, then it would be the spoke is on an angle because it's going to the opposite side flange. It would have a little unbalance of stress, and that could lead to premature failure. So head rims have a kind of a high quality build and design and all that. So these are really good rims, and that's why I like them. Let's rotate it so our valve is now up at the top. This will be, want to follow Sheldon Brown so we don't make any mistakes. All right, so now the valve hole's at the top, and we're looking at our hub. We need a spoke, the first spoke from the drive side that goes up to the first hole. Once we get that set, all the other spokes just go in without any question, without any issue. And for us, because of our drilling, the first hole to the right of the valve is the non-drive side, and then the one after that is the drive side. So that is our first hole. So what we want to do is we want to go down to the hub from the top. If you're looking at it from the top, count over. So start with this first one, right? So 1, then go 2, 3, try 4. Let's try 4 over. We're gonna thread a nipple onto our spoke and pull it through. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna rotate it, and we're gonna see if that lines up pretty well. And for me, that was a good guess, because it's gonna come off of about that angle, the spoke.
Nice.
Okay, it's approximate. If I move the spoke up one, it's gonna rotate it more, and we're gonna miss seeing our valve or our sticker. Okay, so the next thing we do is now we need to finish putting in this first set of spokes on the drive side. So the next spoke, get a short spoke.
Which one's for short? I think it's this one. Yeah.
2/80 is short.
Oh, okay.
So we get a short spoke. Now this is very important. On the hub, we're going to skip a hole and put a spoke in the next hole over. But we're skipping a hole. Okay. So you got it in. Now in the hub, or in the rim, we're going to count over 4 holes.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yep, and then that one goes in there on the 4th hole. And we put the spoke in, and we put the nipple on. And we are going to do this all the way around. We're going to do all of these, and then we're going to do the next set of spokes. So we do one set at a time, like sewing almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is like that.
Or crochet or
something.
knitting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like knitting. I've never knitted before, but I can imagine this is kind of like that.
Yeah.
And just for kind of financial information, the spokes for that wheel were $40. These are the DT Swiss these are the Supreme race spokes. So they are 2.0 by 1.8 butted spoke. And they were $1, like $1.30 or $1.40, something like that each. In contrast, the other spokes that I was considering for the front were the Supreme CX Ray spokes, which is like a bladed type spoke, and they are $3 each.
That's a big difference.
It's a big difference. So I decided, because there's the CX Ray spokes, the reason people like them isn't because they're aero. That they tested these spokes as fatigue tested, and they apparently have the highest fatigue life of all the spokes. But that's not to say that these spokes don't have a good fatigue life. It's just that the CX Ray tested out to have the highest.
Wow.
So that's why people seem to favor those or like them. Our key spoke is this one. Okay. Is this yours? You got your valve at the top?
Clockwise?
Is that the valve hole?
Mm-hmm.
So that's your key spoke. So what it's saying here is, examine the hub. The holes to the left, on the left flange, that's this one.
Okay.
Okay. The hole on the left flange do not line up with the holes on the right flange. That is, if you look straight through the flange, these holes are not lined up. So what you do is you look at it and you go, oh yeah, the holes are not lined up. And the next hole is the next hole past this key spoke on this side is that hole right there.
Okay.
So it's going to be one hole over from the key spoke hole if you look straight through the hub. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to grab a long spoke. Grab a long. Now it says, if the key spoke is next to the valve hole, insert a spoke into the left flange so that it lines up one hole clockwise when viewed from the right side of where the key spoke exits the hub flange. Run this spoke to the hole in the rim that is just clockwise of the key spoke. So that's going to be this whole key spoke, so just this hole here. So this spoke from the left side, one hole over from the key spoke hole, is going to run to this side. And then this also starts from the outside. So we're looking at it here. You start from the outside and then bring it in. So that's nice and symmetric. We're working from outside in on both flanges right now. We're going to go one hole over, which is right there. And we're going to put our nipple in, or spoke on, and then a nipple on the spoke. Okay, but guess what? There's a hang up here.
Uh-oh.
We got a hang up.
Okay.
So that's why we take one step at a time. So what we just did is based on an idea that we are using a right-handed drilling. But these are not right-handed drilled. These are left-handed drilling.
Oh, yeah.
So then it says, if that's the case, so we were just following through the instructions, then actually this spoke needs to go back to the spoke hole previous to it. Between the valve hole and the key spoke, there's another hole here. This spoke actually goes to that hole. So now we have to fix our mistake here.
That was from our other video.
Yeah, we made the same mistake. And that's why I was careful to read that again, because I know that there's a caveat to doing these rims are different than typical. Okay, so now we go back to the spoke hole that's one spoke hole before, and we put this in. Should look symmetric.
That looks beautiful.
There's the key spoke right here. Don't lose track of your key spoke. And we just did that one. So now we're going to go on to, once you get all yours in, we're going to move on to group 3. And Sheldon Brown says there's 4 groups of spokes. So we just did the inside flange spokes. Now we're going to start doing the outside flange spokes. And this is where it's going to get interesting because here's where we're going to start crossing spokes. What you got, being a noodle? What you got, being... Okay, so, all right, we'll get this rotated as best we can. And now it doesn't really matter which hole we start with, but we have to start with the drive side, get a short spoke. Drive side, short spoke. And now this time we're going to start from behind and thread it through a hole. It doesn't matter which one, any hole. Pick a hole, any hole.
Any hole, okay.
Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're doing a 2 cross. So that means we have to cross over. Got it in?
Oops.
So we're trying to keep it slightly rotated. This is going to help us here in a minute. So now we're going to cross over 1. So that's that one. And then go under number 2.
Over and under.
Over and under. So we'll skip, we got to skip 1 hole. So it's going to be the hole after.
Okay.
So we'll skip that hole. So it's going to be the next hole after it. So not that one, but that one. Yep. Okay, it's getting dark, Miss Coles. We're losing daylight.
We are, yeah.
Okay, so I just finished my group 3 set. And I think that's going to be it for now. Now, while you're working on that, I'm going to go ahead and do group 4 so we can kind of wrap up this video.
Okay.
So what I've done is I've put all the drive side spokes on. I know it's getting dark in here. I'll do when I get the wheels trued up, I'll show the last part. But basically, I did the drive side from the inside out. Now we're going to go to the non-drive side from the inside out as well with the longer spokes. And we are going to finish up this wheel build. So we'll do the truing up tomorrow, and that should conclude the wheel lacing and building. Okay, so Miss Coles here is doing the final finite element analysis here on this wheel build. She's getting all the spokes within uniform tension. What's the tension now?
About 22 and a half.
22 and a half. And is that uniform throughout that drive side?
Well, not quite yet.
Working on it though.
Yeah.
Getting close.
Trying to get it around 22.
Okay. We've finished up our wheel build. We've actually trued up all these wheels, and I just want to summarize a few things, and I want to talk about a couple of mistakes we made in the process to hopefully help you guys out there if you're building wheels to avoid this mistake. But before we do, let's have a quick look at these rebuilt or built up wheels. This is Miss Coles' road bike wheel. It's very nice, huh? And we've got the head hub on here with the new 11-speed free hub body. I built this up with black spokes. These are Supreme Race, I believe they are. They're the 1.8 butting, so they're 2.2 millimeters at the end and 1.8 in the middle here. I used the spoke deflection tool to help me with building these wheels, and I have to say this worked out really well. And what's cool about it is it helps you to find the spoke tension, to get a really uniform spoke tension before you start to true the wheel. And sometimes when you're turning the spoke nipples, they feel tighter, and you think that you're actually making the spoke tighter than the others, but it turns out when you check it that it isn't. So sometimes that can throw you off. So it is a very useful tool if you're building wheels, and I would now, after using it, I would highly recommend it. And plus I'm an amateur, so for me it's a really helpful tool to really do this and hopefully do it well. And hopefully it'll hold their tension for a long time and hold their true. So that was Miss Cool's. This is the rebuilt gravel wheel, and this one has the DT Swiss 350 hub, and I reused the old spokes from the other wheel, and then this is a new rim. This is a Head Belgian Plus rim, and Miss Cool's is actually the Head Ardennes rim. They both have the same diameter, the spoke bed diameter or whatever it's called, and they're both the same. So the spoke lengths were roughly the same. The hubs were slightly different. The flange diameters were slightly different. So the spokes were a little different on that for that wheel. But yeah, so you can kind of see here, it's pretty, let me see if I can show you how straight it is. When I went to true up the wheels, the drive side spokes, the tension's a lot higher than on the non-drive side, but I tried to get the non-drive side up at least up to, I think I went with 16 on the chart here, which turns out to be, for this spoke, 16 is 64 kilogram force, which isn't really a force, but good enough. And on the drive side, we went to 22, which is on the chart here, 117, so quite a bit higher. And then last but not least, before we go on to talking about the mistakes I made, here's the front wheel for the gravel bike. And this one has a DT Swiss radially laced front hub, 24 spoke, and I tensioned this one to 20 millimeters or 20. There's a scale on here. I don't know if it's units of millimeters or what, but on here it goes to the number 20, and if you use their chart, you get a force of, for 1.8 spokes, is 94 kilogram force. So 94 kilogram force. And this one came out really nice too. I'm really anxious to try these. Of course, if you see it in the stand, it's very, very true. Now, one thing I want to talk about, I made a couple mistakes when Miss Cool's and I assembled this wheel. We did make a couple mistakes, and I want to talk about that so that hopefully it'll help you guys avoid making the same mistakes we did. But so per Sheldon Brown, when you're lacing up your wheel, you generally you look at it from your drive side, which is what we did. And you have to start with the, you don't have to, but it's a good idea to start with where the valve hole is. Because when you're building the wheels, you want two spokes parallel to the valve hole, so that when you put your tube in or you put your tubeless valve in, you have two straight spokes so you can get the pump on. So that's why you start there. Okay, so when you start, you have to, generally you use this spoke hole for the starting point. But that's if your wheel is right-hand drilling. And these wheels, the head rims, are left-hand drilling. And that means that the first spoke past the valve is drilled with a slight angle in it, and it's angling to the non-drive side. So that's why it's called left-hand drilling. A right-hand drilling would be that the first spoke next to the valve is drilled so that it's angled towards the drive side flange. But in this case, it's not. So what you have to do is when you start your key spoke, that's this one here, when you start to do your spoke layout, you have to start with the key spoke. And that is the very first spoke you put in. Well, if it's a left-hand drilling, you have to skip the first hole and go to the next hole, and that's where you start your key spoke. Then when you lay out your first set of spokes, then you go to the other side, and when you go to put in your next spoke, per the Sheldon Brown instructions, oops, well, that was Miss Cool's wheel, so. per Sheldon Brown's instructions, the next set of spokes are the spokes on the non-drive side. And what you do is you have to look through your hub and you pick the next hole in the back of the hub on this side. And that spoke, if it were a right-hand drilling, would go in to this spoke hole. And you would actually go clockwise. You would look clockwise to the next hole that's in here for the next spoke. But because this is left-hand, we have to go back and start on the non-drive side to the hole that is next to the valve hole in order to get these two parallel lines or spokes. So we actually had to go, you actually had to go counterclockwise back for your non-drive side spoke. And we made the mistake, or I made the mistake, of going clockwise to the next hole. Well, what that did is when we went clockwise, that was too far away, so the spoke was obviously too short for that, so we couldn't get the wheel to true up. We couldn't assemble really the wheel. So we did assemble it, but we couldn't get the spokes correct because they weren't long enough to do it that way. So we made that mistake, and we assembled both wheels that way. So I had to go back yesterday and correct my mistake. I had to relace the non-drive side spokes, all of them. The drive side spokes were fine, but the non-drive side had to be rotated one hole over. And so I had to take out all the spokes and redo it all for both wheels. So it took us a little longer to build it. But I saved a lot of time using this Park Tool tensioner. So I think in the end, it all worked out just fine. I also learned something new about wheel building, or relearned the same thing again, I guess. So that's what happened, everyone. So pay attention to your spoke drilling on your rim and don't make that mistake. And then also, I think in the future, this is a 2-cross wheel. I would like to try a 3-cross wheel build now. And this radial lacing was the first time I've ever done a radial lacing. And it was actually very, very easy. This was probably the easiest wheel to put together and to true up. The other thing that's interesting about radial lacing is that the spokes can just spin in the hub because there's no J bend at the bottom. So they can just spin. So you actually have to hold the spoke with your hands while you're tightening it. And I like that because it helps you to feel. So I like feeling the spoke while I'm tightening it because I can tell if it's twisting or if it's spinning. And so that's a good way to know if you've wound up the spoke or not. But with radial lacing, it's not really a problem. So this is very, very easy to build. So if you're building your first wheel, you might want to consider radial lacing, the front one. And then for the rear, cross spoke lacing is actually not that difficult to do. So anyway, I think that's it, everyone. I'm hoping this video series is really just for fun and hopefully encouraging for some of you. This tool will cost, I think it was I looked at my invoice, it was $86, I think is what I paid for it. And I would definitely recommend it. And I used a little bit of oil on all the spoke nipples. That seems to help a bit too, to help you from twisting. And make sure you get a good truing stand like this one. Not sponsored, but obviously Park Tool is sort of the main bicycle tool manufacturer. So if you're looking for this stuff, you're probably going to find a Park Tool stand, and that one is very good. So anyway, I guess that's it. We're going to put some rim tape now. I got to get the rim tape on, the tires on, and then we're going to take these out on our next or some ride very soon. You might want to, maybe we can do a free hub test. This is the DT Swiss 350. I don't know why people do that, why it's so exciting. All right, what's this? This is the head Belgian, or this is the head hub. got a lot more metallic sound to it. So which hub sound do you like better? Let me know in the comments. And then I'll let you know what I like better. That's the head hub. And this is the DT Swiss hub. I like this one better. I don't really actually like really loud free hubs, but that's it. All right, guys, stay tuned for another video soon. We're going to be bringing you up to date on our dirt touring bikes in another video coming soon. I've got some news to share about those and whatever else we can think of.